$10 million, Mia. 10 million. And what did you get? A piece of paper. Rachel smiled at me from across the conference table. Her red nails tapped the polished wood, slow, deliberate, like a clock counting down. Her attorney sat beside her, already sliding documents into a briefcase as if everything had already been settled, already decided, already done. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. White, simple, my name written across the front in my father's handwriting, just my name. Dad always knew which one of us was worth investing in, Rachel said. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had closed completely, and if I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure what would come out. Crying, maybe, screaming, possibly both. Mr. Hargrove, our family's attorney for over 20 years, cleared his throat softly. He was a small man with round glasses and a gray wool suit. He was looking down at his desk, shuffling nothing in particular. But for just 1 second, before he looked away, his eyes met mine. Something passed across his face. Not pity, not quite. He looked away, and I sat there, holding a letter, while my sister walked out of the room with $10 million. My father built his first apartment building when he was 32 years old. He used to take me there on Sundays when I was small. We'd walk the hallways together, just the two of us, and he'd point at the water stains on the ceiling, the cracked tiles in the lobby, the peeling paint by the stairwell. "This is where we start, Mia," he'd say. "You always start with what's broken, then you fix it, then it becomes yours." I was 7 the first time he said that. I nodded like I understood, even though I didn't. Not yet. Rachel never came on those Sunday walks. She said buildings were boring. She preferred to stay home with our mother, watching films and painting her nails. My father would smile at that, a small, quiet smile I could never quite read, and then he'd take my hand and say, "Ready?" And I'd say yes. Gerald Harmon had built something that most people in our city whispered about with a kind of reverence. Commercial properties downtown, residential complexes across 3 counties, acres of undeveloped land purchased cheaply at exactly the right moment. He'd started with nothing but a business loan and an 18-hour-a-day work ethic, and by the time I was in high school, the Harmon name meant something. It meant a lot, actually. Rachel wore that name like a crown. She was 2 years older than me, and she moved through life the way beautiful, confident people do, as if the world had been arranged in advance for her personal convenience, and everyone else just hadn't caught on yet. She had our mother's looks. Dark hair, pale skin, a smile that could walk into any room and rearrange it. I had my father's eyes, brown and quiet, the kind that watch and remember. We were never truly close, not after we were small. When we were very young, I can remember curling up with her on the couch during thunderstorms, sharing a blanket, pretending neither of us was scared. But by the time we were teenagers, we had become strangers who happened to share a last name and a breakfast table. Rachel wanted parties and designer things and attention. I wanted to understand how my father did what he did. He noticed that. He always noticed. When I was 16, he started letting me sit in on his meetings. Not the important ones, just the smaller check-ins with property managers and contractors. I'd sit in the corner with a notebook and try to follow everything. On the drive home, he'd quiz me. "What did we learn today, Mia?" Always get renovation estimates, in writing before approving anything. And verify the contractor's insurance certificate before they touch a single wall. He'd nod, "Good girl." Rachel thought it was strange. She told me once at dinner, when I was 17, that I was basically just Dad's unpaid assistant and that I should be out living my life while I still had the chance. My father looked up from his plate when she said that. He looked at Rachel for a long, quiet moment. Then he looked at me. He didn't say a word, just went back to eating, but I remembered that look. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I was working in commercial real estate, not for my father's company, but for another firm across the city. I'd wanted to earn my own knowledge, my own track record. My father respected that. "You don't need my name on your first deal," he'd said. "You need your own." Rachel, by that point, had tried 3 different careers and settled into nothing in particular. She lived in a beautiful apartment in the most expensive part of the city that my father paid for. She had a social life that looked stunning on the surface, events, trips, dinners at restaurants I'd never been to. She was also always asking my father for more money. I never asked him for anything. Not once. I'm not saying that to make myself sound noble. I just didn't want it. What I wanted was to eventually prove I could build something real the way he had. I thought we had time. We didn't. My father had his first heart attack in the fall when I was 29. He was 63 years old, still working full days, still sharp as a blade. The doctors told him to slow down. He nodded politely and went back to work. His second heart attack came 14 months later. He was gone in 36 hours. The grief was something I can't fully describe even now. Not because it was complicated, it wasn't. It was simple and enormous. My father was the person who made the most sense to me of anyone I had ever known. He was the only person who had ever looked at me and seen exactly who I was and thought that was enough. More than enough. And now he was gone, and the world was just quieter. In a way that had nothing to do with sound. The funeral was held on a Tuesday. It was cold. Hundreds of people came, business associates, long-term tenants, people who'd bought their first homes through Harmon Properties, city council members, contractors. My father had touched a lot of lives. I stood at the front beside Rachel and received condolences for 4 hours without fully processing a single one. Rachel cried beautifully at the funeral. She had always been good at that. 2 weeks after the burial, Mr. Hargrove's office called and asked us both to come in for the reading of the will. I remember driving there alone that morning. The city looked exactly the same as it always did. People on sidewalks, traffic moving, coffee shops with lines out the door. All of it continuing forward, completely indifferent to the fact that my father wasn't in the world anymore. I sat in the waiting room for 11 minutes before Rachel arrived. She came in wearing a white coat and dark sunglasses, as if she was arriving at an event. She looked at me briefly when she walked in, not unkindly exactly, but with the particular expression she saved for situations where she already knew the outcome. "You look tired," she said. "I am tired," I said. She sat down across from me and checked her phone. Mr. Hargrove came to collect us a few minutes later. He shook both our hands, said he was deeply sorry for our loss, he meant it, I could tell, and led us into the conference room. The dark wood table. The tall windows overlooking the street, the water carafe in the middle, a single manila folder in front of his chair. We sat down. He opened the folder. He read the will. Rachel received the primary estate. The house, the large, beautiful house we'd grown up in, worth approximately $4 million on its own. The investment accounts. A business holding that Hargrove described as the primary operating entity of Harmon Properties. And a cash disbursement. $10 million. Cash, to be transferred within 60 days of probate. Rachel didn't make a sound when he said it. She just inhaled slowly, settled back in her chair, and folded her hands in her lap. The way someone does when they've received exactly what they were expecting. Then Hargrove paused. He cleared his throat. The way he always did when he was moving to something important. He reached into the folder and produced a white envelope. He slid it across the table to me. "To Mia Harmon," he read from a separate page, "I leave the attached letter with my love." That was all. The will was closed. Rachel looked at the envelope in my hands, then at me. And then she smiled, slow, satisfied, the kind of smile I hadn't seen since we were kids and she'd gotten something I hadn't. $10 million, Mia, she said quietly. "And what did you get?" "A piece of paper." I wanted to argue, demand an explanation. But there was nothing in the will to argue with. It was legal. Formal, done. I looked at Hargrove. He was studying his desk. Carefully, deliberately, he would not meet my eyes. "Is that everything?" Rachel asked him pleasantly. "That concludes the formal reading," he said. "Yes." Rachel stood, buttoned her coat, and picked up her bag. At the door, she paused. "Don't be a stranger, Mia," she said. "You're welcome to come to the house anytime, now that it's my house." She walked out, and I sat there alone, holding an envelope. I drove home in a silence that was different from grief. Heavier, because grief had a shape I recognized. This was something else, the particular feeling of a floor dropping away beneath you while you're still standing in the same place. Not yet fallen, just waiting to. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time before I opened the envelope. My father's handwriting was careful, deliberate. He had never been a man who wrote quickly. The letter read, "My dear Mia, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I owe you an explanation, though I suspect you have already begun to figure it out on your own, because that is who you are. You have always been the one who watches and listens and understands before anyone tells you to. I have given Rachel what she needs. She needs the security of a number she can see, a house she can stand inside, a title she can point to. She will feel rich, and for a time she will be. I hope it is enough for her, though I suspect it will not be. That is not a cruelty. It is simply who she is. I have given you something different, not less. Different, but there are things I was not able to put in a will. There are things that require a different kind of arrangement. When the time is right, Mr. Hargrove will explain. He is a good man, and he has been loyal to me for a very long time. Trust him, wait 30 days. After 30 days, go back to his office. Tell him you are ready. And Mia, you were always ready. You just didn't know yet that I knew. All my love, Dad. I read it 3 times. Then I sat completely still at my kitchen table and stared at the wall. Wait 30 days. That was all he gave me. A letter, a timeline, and a man I was supposed to trust. For the next 30 days, I went to work. I came home. I tried to sleep. I didn't always succeed. Rachel, by contrast, was moving very quickly. Within a week of the will reading, she had moved into the family home. She called me once during that first week. Once, to tell me she was sorting through our father's things and that I should come by if there was anything personal I wanted before she refreshed the space. I went on a Saturday afternoon. She'd already had someone in to assess the furniture. Small orange stickers marked certain pieces, the antiques, the things my father had collected carefully over decades, the oil painting from above his desk, the writing table he'd had since before we were born. Are you selling these? I asked. Some of them. The aesthetic is just not what I want for the house now. She looked around the living room with the expression of someone already mentally replacing everything. It all feels so old. I'm thinking lighter, more open. I picked up a small framed photograph from the bookshelf. My father and me, taken on a Sunday at the first apartment building when I was about 9, his arm around my shoulders, both of us squinting into the sun, laughing at something I can no longer remember. Can I have this? I asked. Of course, she said, without looking at it. I took the photograph and left. 16 days later, my cousin Sandra called. Rachel's been telling people you got cut out of the will, Sandra said. She told the whole family you got basically nothing, that your father knew you two weren't close and he chose her. I was quiet for a moment. She's telling everyone, Mia. I just thought you should know. I thanked her and hung up. I wanted to be angry. Part of me was. But mostly I looked at the calendar on my wall, counted the remaining days, and told myself to wait. 12 more days. I could wait 12 more days. On the 30th day, I put on a suit jacket, drove to Hargrove's office, and told the receptionist I had an appointment. She looked at the book. Then she looked up at me and said, "Of course, he's been expecting you." He was expecting me. He showed me into the same conference room. But the table was different this time. There was a second folder, thicker, and beside it, a second envelope, sealed with my father's personal wax stamp. The same small mark he'd used on formal correspondence for as long as I could remember. Hargrove sat down across from me and folded his hands. Your father asked me to begin this conversation by saying something specific, he said. He asked me to say, the will was never the whole story. I nodded slowly. He knew Rachel would contest anything that appeared equal, Hargrove continued. He knew that if your inheritance appeared alongside hers in the will, she would fight it. She would tie it up in court for years, potentially destroying value that took him 30 years to build. He was very clear-eyed about who his daughters were. That was not a judgment. It was a calculation. He opened the thick folder. 2 years before he passed, Hargrove said, your father created a separate legal structure, an irrevocable trust, a type that cannot be contested through the probate process. It operates entirely outside the will. It was funded privately and documented privately. No family members were informed. The trust was finalized, witnessed, and sealed. He paused. Mia, your father placed his entire real estate portfolio inside this trust. I stared at him. Not the management company, Hargrove said carefully. Not the corporate shell that appears in the will, the entity Rachel received, which currently holds the operating name, the office lease, the staff contracts, and approximately 11 months of overhead liability. The actual properties. The land, the commercial holdings, the residential buildings, the undeveloped parcels, all of it. He pushed a document across the table. At the top of the first page was a number. A total assessed value, $47,200,000. I looked at it for a long time without speaking. In addition, Hargrove said, there is a private account maintained entirely within the trust structure, separate from anything Rachel or the estate has access to, with a current balance of $8,340,000. He slid a second document across. The trust names you as sole beneficiary, effective immediately. No waiting period, no probate process, no contest window. It is already yours, Mia. It has been yours, technically, since the day he created it. I heard myself breathe. He also left you this, Hargrove said. He picked up the sealed envelope and held it out to me. On the front, in my father's handwriting, were 2 words. Well done. I opened the envelope in the car. Inside was a single page. The handwriting was steady and calm. My father always wrote like he had all the time in the world. Mia. I hope Hargrove explained things clearly. He's thorough. He's also the only person outside of you and me who knows any of this exists, and he has been bound by attorney-client privilege since the day we drew up the documents. I need you to understand something. I didn't do this to punish your sister. I did it to protect everything I built. Rachel is generous with money, specifically, other people's money. She has been drawing from a secondary family account for the last 4 years without telling me. Approximately $300,000 in total. I didn't confront her because I didn't want to spend my final years in a war with my own child. But I also could not hand her the keys to everything I worked for and simply hope for the best. What she received in the will, the management company, is real. It has the name, the logo, the office, the staff, but it does not have the properties. Those are yours. At some point, she will figure this out. Possibly when the first lease renewals come due and she finds she cannot sign for anything real. Let Hargrove handle it when that happens. He knows what to say. You always understood what this was, Mia. All those Sundays, all those drives home. You were learning because you wanted to, not because you had to. That is the difference. Build something good with it. Dad. I sat in the parking garage for a long time after reading that. $300,000. Rachel had been taking money from our father for 4 years, and he had known. He'd known and said nothing and quietly rearranged everything so that she couldn't do the same thing to the business. I thought about the orange stickers on the antique furniture, the way she'd moved in within a week, the phone calls to family telling everyone I'd been cut out. I thought about the Sunday drives. I drove home. Rachel called me 3 weeks later. I was in a meeting with one of my father's property managers, now technically my property manager, going over occupancy numbers on one of the residential complexes. My phone buzzed. I let it go to voicemail. She called again 20 minutes later. I stepped into the hallway and answered. Mia, her voice was different. The confidence was there, but underneath it was something tighter. Clipped. I need to talk to you about the properties. Which properties? I said. Dad's buildings. I've been looking into the management structure, and something isn't adding up. What specifically isn't adding up? The building on Clement Street. I tried to reach the leasing manager about renewal terms, and he told me he needed to speak with the trust administrator. Silence. What trust? She said. You should call Hargrove, I said. I already called Hargrove. He said to speak with you. Then we should probably speak in person, I said, not over the phone. She came to my apartment 2 days later. I made coffee. I sat across from her at my kitchen table and watched her face as Hargrove, who joined by phone, as we had planned, explained the trust structure. Calmly, clearly, with the patience of a man who had rehearsed this many times in his head. Rachel's face went through several things in the span of about 4 minutes. Confusion, first, then disbelief, then a white, cold fury I hadn't seen on her face since we were teenagers. He can't do that, she said. He can't put everything in a trust and just leave me the name. He absolutely could, Hargrove said, and he did. The trust is irrevocable and was finalized approximately 26 months before his passing. It is not subject to probate and cannot be contested through the estate. I'll contest it anyway. I'll hire someone. You may do that, Hargrove said. However, the trust was drafted by a specialist, witnessed by 2 independent parties, and the documentation of its creation is extremely thorough. It would be a considerable legal expense with a very low probability of success. Rachel looked at me. Did you know about this? Not until 30 days after Dad died, I said. Same as he asked. He planned this, she said, not a question. Yes, I said, he planned this. She walked to the window. stood there with her back to me for a long moment. When she turned around, her expression had shifted, softer now, and underneath it, something I could only describe as fear. "I've already spent $300,000, Mia," she said quietly. "Between what I took from the account over the years and what I've spent since the will, I'm not going to make the 10 million last." I looked at her. "I know," I said. "What does that mean?" "It means I know you took money from him," I said. "He knew too. He told me in the letter." She didn't say anything for a long moment. "I was going to pay it back," she said. "I know," I said again. I didn't freeze Rachel out. I want to be honest about that, because the story could have gone that way, and most people would have understood if it had. But my father's letter didn't ask me to be cruel. It asked me to build something good. I restructured the holding company Rachel had inherited, not to take it from her, but to make it viable. The brand, the name, the office, the staff, those were real assets too, just not the ones she'd thought they were. With Hargrove's help, I offered her a formal arrangement. A 10% stake in the management subsidiary, enough to generate income, in exchange for her agreement not to pursue legal action against the trust. She took it. We didn't become close after that. We're still, in many ways, the strangers who share a last name that we became somewhere in our teenage years. But we speak occasionally, and we speak honestly, and that's more than we had before. The management company, rebuilt properly under the trust structure, is operating at a level my father would recognize. I spent the first year doing almost nothing but learning. Not pretending to know things I didn't, not moving too fast, just learning, the way he taught me. I still have the photograph. The one from the bookshelf, the two of us squinting into the sun in front of the first apartment building, his arm around my shoulders. I put it on my desk on the first morning I sat down in the office that used to be his. I think about those Sundays a lot. This is where we start, Mia. You always start with what's broken, then you fix it. Then it becomes yours. He was talking about a building that day. A crumbling old building with water stains and peeling paint and cracked tiles in the lobby. But I think he was talking about a lot of things. I think he had always been talking about a lot of things. I just had to wait 30 days to understand.